So we're not in the present moment able to put anything towards savings on that. And this is just as a result of the environment that we have to live in within the United States. We see in many cases, such as catastrophic events, such as the weather occurrences, where people lose their home, black people lose their homes. Anytime you have to take off of work, that puts your job in jeopardy, that puts your salary in jeopardy, that puts your income in jeopardy, that puts your future plans in jeopardy. Structural barriers to economic security. You have systemic racism. Persistent discrimination in housing, lending, and hiring perpetuates economic fragility. For example, black homeowners face lower property valuations in majority black neighborhoods. So if you buy a home, let's say at $150,000, 3 years down the line, you go to sell that home, yeah, the house might be worth $350,000, but most people are going to, the property evaluators are going to lowball you and set that home at maybe $275,000 to $300,000. So as a result, you're not getting the full value of the house, which detracts from everything else that you can do. Yes, you have made money over the amount that you paid originally on the home, but you're still not getting the full value of the home. And during that period of time, as the value of the home went up, and you get the amount over the amount that you paid for the home, you have been lowballed, so therefore the inflation of everything else goes into what you have lost in the low valuation of the home. Overrepresentation in unstable, non-unionized jobs, and underrepresentation in high-wage sectors such as tech, finance, which also limits wealth building. Now, this goes into more of the income, but yeah, if you're in a situation where you're an Amazon worker, you work at the local supermarket, you work in a warehouse, or even at a hotel in any various capacity, if those are not unionized jobs, those people can get rid of you for any number of reasons, whether it's downsizing or they want to bring people in at a lower wage cost. We don't live the lifestyle to be able to absorb those job cuts and then those low wages for the most part. We're living paycheck to paycheck. So this drives into the struggle that we have in America for the most part. Debt and asset gaps. Black middle-class families carry higher debt burdens, student loans, predatory lending, and are less likely to inherit wealth. So here's where the crux of everything lies in America, where we have been lied to for the most part. You take black child X that grows up in anywhere America. They are proselytized and inundated with what they must do to succeed in society. The first thing is they are told to go to school, get an education, go to the highest levels of education. Now, in a generic sense, that actually works. But for black people, that doesn't work. It's an anomaly. Not saying you shouldn't go to school. Not saying you shouldn't get an education. Get an education. But here you must know where you are not the same as other people in America in general. Now, you might get the one person, so, well, I inherited something. I went to school on a full scholarship, right? My credit is good, so I'm not subject to predatory lending. However, that's not the general rule for black people in America. Kudos to you if this doesn't impact you on an individual level. But if we're being honest, and remember, let's go back to the imagery here. This is more for Gen X, right? Those that are like 60 to 45 to 60 years old in America. You know what these images mean if you grew up in America. You understand what these images mean. You know what they were selling to you when they sold these images. I know I did, and I'm 50. Now, why this factor of debt and asset gaps when we're talking about someone going to school, getting an education, right? So black child X graduates high school with high grades, high SAT score. They go to college and university. Normally what happens, that student incurs student loans. And those student loans, most of the time, in many cases, they draw out for 20 years. So say you graduated at an average of 22 years old, you finished paying student loans at around the age of 42 years old. You were a whole entirely different person by that point. And for black people, that's if you got a job in the field that you graduated in, right? But okay, the higher you go, the more student loans you incur. That means you have your master's degree, you have your PhD level, MD level, however far you go after bachelor's, right? So in those cases, you got people that incur debt of $100,000. Well, you say, well, if you go that high, you're making $150,000 a year. You can pay off that $100,000 in no time, but you haven't taken into consideration the mortgage, the car note, the insurance, the incidentals that come with that. So you're only really able to pay a fraction of a percentage on these student loans. So you're drawn out over the entire course of the term of the loan repayment plan. So here's what happens in the majority of other households. For white people, in most cases, your black child has to compete with those same white young people, children, what have you. How can you compete if you have student loans with someone who has no student loans because their parent paid for the entirety of the 4 years of college or university? You can't compete. How can you compete in a workforce? Yes, as a black person, I have the same salary as a white person, but I have 6 figures in student loan debt versus the white person who has 0 student loan debt. To include the fact that that white person also received an inheritance, right, through generational wealth, right, and I received nothing. So black people find themselves in this cycle where every person born is pretty much starting from 0, when everyone else gets to stack in every subsequent generation. So one generation accumulates this amount, forwards that to the next generation, third generation gets another amount. We come down to this generation. Now, all of that wealth going back 4 or 5 generations has stacked and accumulated and come to you, whereas black people start from 0 in every subsequent generation. Hope everyone can hear me here. Let me check in with the chat. Salute to the family.